A second, and we're on. Hey everyone, welcome to Technology for Good. This is Friday, the 13th of March. Ooh.
Don't get me started.
And this is episode 52 of the Technology for Good show. We are hosting the show today, not just on the Hangout, but we have a crowd chat site up and running, and it's at crowdchat.net/tech4good. So if you want to drop comments in there, the comments will be threaded. As always, if you just leave comments on Twitter with the hashtag tech4good, as you see there in my lower third, they'll be picked up and they'll be dropped into the crowd chat site as well. Yep. So either way, we can have the comments in there. Chris, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Chris Kernahan, SAP mentor, inveterate technology lover and cloud architect, and thank you very much for having me back, Tom. Much appreciated.
Not at all. Not at all. We had an interesting week this week and last week in terms of tech news. Last week we had Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, and so there was a huge number of stories last week. And I think a lot of people were also expecting a lot this week because you had the Apple announcement at the start of the week on Monday about the smartwatch and etc. Yep. So as a result of that, I think people held back. So there's actually not as many stories this week apart from the Apple stories as we might have expected. So I reckon next week again will be heavy with stories, but this week was light enough. Yeah. So we've kind of got a dearth of stories, but we'll go through the ones we have anyway. You said you have a hard stop at the top of the hour, Chris. So.
I do. I do have a hard stop, but as I said before, I said never underestimate our ability to talk rubbish.
Speak for yourself, man.
Oh, Jesus. I always talk rubbish.
All right, we'll hit on into the stories anyway. There are a few of them there, not to worry, not to worry. And the first one that I thought might be of interest to people was, again, climate stuff first. This one about the Arctic sea ice being at its record winter low. And basically, what this is saying is, and this is from Scientific American, and what this is saying is that the winter ice in the Arctic should be at its greatest extent around now before it starts melting as the temperatures pick up again. But unfortunately, this year, it was at a record low since the satellite records of the ice in the Arctic started in 1979. So there's been less ice there this year than we've ever been aware of before. And this is unfortunately unsurprising. This is the trend we're seeing. I know in the U.S. Northeast, we had a cold snap in January and February. Yeah. But the thing about that is that's where the cold weather went. You had the jet stream, which normally traps the cold air up in the Arctic. You had a dip in that as a result of climate change, and that cold air came down from the Arctic and chilled the Northeast instead of trapping the cold air up in the Arctic, and as a result we had less ice formation, which means that the summer ice extent this summer will be at its lowest ever again, more than likely.
Jesus, it is horrible to think. But the part of the scary thing in this article is it doesn't just talk about the climate effects. It talks about the opportunities that certain people see in this, which is for oil exploration and mineral exploration. And to be honest with you, given some of the conversations we've had over the last while, especially around falling oil prices and the knock-on effect on oil exploration, kind of puts that a bit in the shadow. It's the mineral exploration that is probably the scariest, especially when you take into consideration our technological society and where some of our rare earth metals come from.
Yeah.
You can see a lot of companies trying to find alternative sources for those metals.
And you're having a bit of a scramble to stake out that area now. The Chinese, for example, are trying to stake a claim on the Arctic. Which, you know, they're quite far from the Arctic, so their justification is a difficult one. But they are actively trying to put a stake in the ground there, and the ice there, and say, you know.
Well, Russia did it. What was it, about 2 or 3 years ago, with a publicity stunt using a submersible and a Russian flag.
Sure. Well, I mean, they border it, so they've at least got some, you know, claim themselves. The Canadians, the Americans, kind of, because they've got Alaska. The Danes, because they've got Greenland, you know, and then Norway as well, and maybe Sweden, kind of, you know, and that's about it, really, you know. Yeah,
it's funny actually, because there isn't the same treaty that protects the Arctic in the same way as the Antarctic.
No, there isn't.
Which is surprising. But because the Antarctic Treaty only came in the late 1940s, I think.
Was it that late?
I can't remember. I think part of the reason was it was. I'll have a quick look on Wikipedia, but there isn't a similar protection treaty, which I find surprising.
There is an agreement in place. There is that. But it's nothing like the one. You're right. It's nothing like the one for the Antarctic. Anyway, we'll power ahead on to the next story, because, you know, we always do the one bad news story, and we'll hit into the good news ones now. And here we go. The first good news one I saw, which I thought was very nice, was that wind and solar are now growing faster than fossil fuels. And this is a story in the Washington Post, which is not the most liberal of newspapers, in fact.
No, not really.
They've been quite skeptical on climate science for a long time. And they've come out and said that there's a lot of positive news about clean energy lately, and by that they mean good news, and that clean energy is taking off, which is, you know, that's great.
Absolutely.
And they've saying that from 2008 to present, wind and solar energy capacity in the US has tripled. Now, that wouldn't be that hard considering how much there was in 2008. You know, that's like, you know, three times one is 3. You know, it's from a pretty small base. But anyway, it is taking off. And it finds that electricity generated from wind and solar grew a lot faster than those generated by fossil fuels last year, and in fact solar more than doubled, and wind outgrew all other sources. So it's an interesting article that goes into a lot more detail, but basically the bottom line is that now renewables are starting to get a foothold in generation in the US, and, you know, they grew more last year than any of the fossil fuel sources. You know, about time.
No, absolutely. But the thing I have is that, obviously, you know, the American markets are much more fragmented than they are in the EU, because of state law and things like that there. So, you know, in Europe, we see massive energy companies like EDF, which is trans-European and things like that. And I wonder whether in America those, shall we say, I'm not going to say microgeneration projects, but those state level providers are getting better tax breaks, and also because they're not so massive, they're looking a little bit further into the future and protecting their own investments and their own generation capabilities. I don't know. I think there has to be something at play there, because it has just taken off massively, and when you have smaller companies, your compliance and your approval processes could be shorter, which means you're actually more capable of doing it in an agile way, as opposed to.
I think there's a shift as well. One of the big shifts in terms of solar is just the price drop. Has been enormous. It's been 20 to 30% year on year for the last 5 years. The price drop, you know, which is pretty spectacular.
That is,
and in terms of wind, it's just gaining more acceptance, and I think there's probably some regulatory shift and some pressure from the top as well to do that. So it's a number of things. There's more carbon regulation as well, which makes the coal plants less attractive.
Yeah.
So, if you can't use coal, what else are you going to use? You can use gas. Okay, that's fine. But, why not diversify and get, some gas and
Oh,
some wind as well?
well, the other thing is those plants are massive, and they require a massive capital investment. They're effectively a single point of failure. Whereas when you look at wind power and solar power, you can have multiple plants servicing a grid, and multiple turbines and things like that there. So when you have a much more fault tolerant network as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we'll move on. The next one, and I know you were interested in this one. The next one I saw was the one about the Goodyear tire, and it's a concept at the moment where they are going to harvest heat from the tires to power the cars. So it's I don't know what to make of this personally. I don't. I'm quite skeptical because the amount of energy you're going to get back is not going to be enormous. You have to think.
No.
It might be enough to top up the 12-volt battery in the car, but it's certainly not going to be enough to drive a powertrain in an electric vehicle. Far from it.
No,
far from it.
Definitely not. But it to me it's a proof of concept that extends the idea of piezoelectrics in wearables and things like that. So it is I think it's one of those things where they're trying to harvest as much energy and waste as little energy as possible.
Yeah.
And from that point of view, it's a great idea. But as you say, how much are you actually going to get? You may be able to, as we get smarter, we'll obviously embed more sensors in our things, and there will be sensors in tires. We already have pressure sensors, but we'll also, we may have better grip sensors and stuff that actually function at the tread level. And using piezoelectrics, you could power those quite easily.
Yeah.
So, but it's not going to drive a powertrain. No, no two ways about it. No.
And I mean, the obvious way to think of that is that you as I say, you can't create energy. You can only change it from one form to another. So you can't exceed the inputs. Yeah. So it's a simple way just of thinking of it that way. Yeah. But anyway, it's I guess it's an interesting proof, as you say, and we'll see what comes from it.
Absolutely.
We'll plow on. So I saw another one that I thought was interesting, and this is one we talked about briefly before we started.
Yes.
It's this solar impulse plane. It's a huge, broad plane. You can see the wingspan there. It's hard to get an idea of the scale, but the wingspan there is larger than the wingspan of a 747.
Yeah.
But the actual plane itself only weighs something like 2.5 tons. So it's covered in solar panels. It's got no other source of fuel or energy except the solar panels and batteries. It can fly, as you can see in this picture here, it can fly through the night because it's got battery banks as well as the solar panels. And the idea is they're going to fly around the world. Now it's not a non-stop trip around the world by any manner of means, but they're flying in a number of hops around the world just to prove that it's possible for a plane carrying 2 people to do to circumnavigate the globe.
Yeah.
And it harkens back to the first days of flight.
Oh, it does completely.
When you have people like Lindbergh and Alcock and Brown, who were going out in these small rickety crafts, not unlike this one, and trying to cross the Atlantic. Alcock and Brown were the first to cross the Atlantic. Lindbergh was the first to solo cross the Atlantic.
Earhart, Amelia Earhart as well, and then she vanished. Yeah, that's when she vanished. Yeah.
So
it's an amazing thing.
It is. This is the next kind of stage on where we're trying to get rid of fossil fuels from flight, and instead of using fossil fuels, using solar. It will take a long time before we have solar-powered commercial flight.
Yeah,
that's a good bit off.
Yeah,
but it's only through projects like this that we'll get there.
Yeah. Well, we looked at Bert Rutan, for example. He did the he's a legend in the community for his planes. He did the Voyager, which was the around the world on with a single tank of fuel.
That's right.
And then also Spaceship One, which won the Anasari X Prize. So it'd be interesting to see if he's anything to do with this. Actually, he's mentioned in the article at the bottom, but it's one of those things you just look at it and you go, that is fantastic. And then the one thing that I would say is the power to weight ratio in the batteries.
Yeah. Is
one direct benefit that'll just come right out of the gate on that. That has to be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that will have knock-on effects not just in aviation but also in cars, for example. Yeah,
exactly. Our one of our favorite people would be greatly appreciative of the power to weight ratio coming from those batteries, or he may have had a hand in it even to start with.
Yeah, true. Okay, so I mentioned at the start of the show that you had the big Apple announcement or event, the Spring Forward event at the start of the week. So for me, there were a number of announcements came out of it. For me, this one was the most interesting one.
Yes.
Apple announced this thing called Research Kit. Now, it didn't get a huge amount of airplay because it was a bit left field. But what it is it's a framework for developers to develop medical research applications that can be deployed on iPhones. And not just on iPhones, because at the very end of the announcement, they said, not only is it for iPhones, but they're going to open source it.
Wow.
And that then automatically, they didn't say under what license, but that then automatically opens it up to the other mobile platforms, the Android, the Windows, the BlackBerry, etc. They also said, and they were very, forthright about this. You can see it on the screen there. They said Apple will not see your data, and they made a big point about that. They said you decide who you share the data with, if you want to share the data, and Apple at no point will Apple ever see your data. And when you hear them say that, and this is not the first time they've said that. They said this about the payments as well. When you hear them say that, that's a shot across Google's bows.
Oh yeah.
Because Google has to see your data. Yeah. It has to see your email so it can serve you ads in Gmail. It has to see et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So this is Apple thumbing their nose at Google very much in this case.
Yeah.
The other really interesting thing that I saw that came out of this was this tweet by this guy called John Wilbanks, who works on one of the applications. They demoed or they mentioned 5 applications that were released on the day.
Yes.
And one of them was around Parkinson's. It was called Empower. And this guy, John Wilbanks, who's involved in the development of the Empower Parkinson's one, said that after 6 hours, we have 7,500 people enrolled in our Parkinson's study, and the last one, the largest one ever before this, was only 1,700 people.
And so, that was probably even a meta-analysis.
Yeah.
So it was,
no, that would have been.
That
would have been a study. It would have been a study. Yeah. So the largest Parkinson's study was 1,700 people, and in 6 hours they enrolled 7,500 people. So it just goes to show that the possibilities of this are just enormous.
Yeah.
The data that they'll be able to suck in, and the demonstration was really impressive. The way they're doing it, it's the potential for this to change medical research forever is enormous. It really, really is. And there was another couple of stories around that I saved here. I'll just go through them quickly.
Yeah.
So you have this one from TechCrunch, basically just saying, yeah, it turns the iPhone into diagnostic devices, which it does. And you can see this is one of the screens from the Empower app. And you've got 20 seconds to tap as quickly as you can with 2 fingers on those 2 red circles, and that's just measuring your coordination.
Yeah.
And a lot of the tests that happen in surgeries are extremely subjective.
Yes.
But when you've got like 7,500 people, or that was after 6 hours, there's a lot more people after signing up for it now. When you've got those all going through one test, it's a lot more objective, and the data you get back is potentially far more interesting.
Yeah.
And it can pull data out of your Apple Health profile, so that it's combining that, and it can you can push data into it as well. And this is where you sign off on your giving consent. You get informed consent. It measures your steps as well, to measure your gait, and it also you get to say like that as long as you can into the microphone. So if you got some kind of tremor in your voice as a result of something like Parkinson's, it can measure that, and it keeps a baseline, and it measures against that baseline, so it tracks you over time. And the other interesting thing, which isn't in this article, is that one of the things that the guy who gave the demonstration, Jeff Williams, I think is his name, he's SVP Ops for Apple. He was saying that apparently with Parkinson's, that if you do exercise, that your tremors decrease. So you can actually see this in 2 graphs in the application. You can measure your exercise, obviously, you're walking or whatever, and you can measure the severity of your tremors, and you can see if they track. It's giving information to the user as well as giving information to the medical research organizations. And I mean, there was they released 5 apps. One was for Parkinson's, another was for diabetes, another was for heart disease, another was for breast cancer, and there was another one who forgotten off the top of my head.
I have it here. Cardiovascular, asthma, breast cancer,
asthma was the one I forgot. So, fascinating stuff. And the ability of as I say, of something like this, particularly if it gets taken up by Android as well, and rolled out there, the possibilities are amazing.
Yeah, I have to say, actually, and I think it comes back to Apple being a good corporate citizen is the fact that this is for research.
Yeah, I mean, Apple aren't getting a penny out of it.
No, exactly, and that is just absolutely amazing. So it is, and as you say, quite a lot of medical data can be subjective, especially when it's collected in many different centers, in large scale studies. This, having this app and leveling the playing field, as it were, is really, really good. So
having the same test applied to all those thousands of people, and the one arbiter of those tests, whereas each individual doctor who examines a patient has got their own interpretation.
Yes, exactly. So it will. This will be one of those things that people will look back on and just say, how did we do without this? And I genuinely do think that, especially the other thing is that I would find it interesting as to how the ethics works in terms of ethics committees. To get an app into the research program, what do you have to do? Do you have to pass an ethics committee, or before you submit, do you have to pass your own ethics committee? And then, but at the same time, it does make it easier for people to sign up, which lowers the barrier to entry, which means you get a larger data set and all the rest of it. So I find the ethics question interesting, because that is one of the things that researchers historically have always spoken out about, to say it's such a problem.
Yeah, and it is, and there has to be a certain amount of informed consent. So part of the process of these applications is that you get people to, and this is all new, so nobody knows the exact answers, but part of the process is you walk people through giving them the information, and they watch videos and they have to answer questions on them. So, and then they have to sign off, as you saw the signature there as well. So there is an informed consent thing there. What's missing from the informed consent thing is the ability of people who are signing up to actually ask questions. Yeah. Because in a one-to-one situation with a doctor, they can ask the question if there's something they're not sure of. That is missing from it. And the application developers, I read a couple of interviews with them, and they said they are aware of that deficiency, and they're trying to find a way to see if they can get over that. But other than that, it seems, you know, that they seem to have thought most things through.
Yeah, I thinking about one of my last statements about lowering the barrier to entry for people to take part in the study. It does create a barrier. You know, investing in this is not small potatoes, because you have to develop the app and you have to standardize, you know, and test it and all the rest of it. But having said that, the App Store and app creation has hugely democratized software development and software selling. So I don't think I would overestimate the effect that creating an app and stuff for research would be, but it does. You know, you may find it would some people sort of shying away from it, but I don't think. Well, I think you should embrace it and do it.
Yeah. So on that, I was reading one of the researchers talking about previous medical research they were doing, and they were saying, you know, it might cost $5 million. And they might be lucky to get 1,000 people signing up just to set up the test.
Wow.
Whereas, you know, you'd create a pretty good app for $5 million.
Yeah, you would actually. You would. You know, if you couldn't do an app for $5 million, you're doing something wrong.
You know. So, and we saw there. I mean, okay, the app, the 5 apps there were launched on the App Store on the announcement. So they got, you know, pretty. It was a pretty nice start for them. Yeah. But even so, I mean, with something like this, you're going to push it out through the medical community. Yeah. So doctors will be, you know, pushing it to their patients. Pushing might be the wrong term, but they would be, you know, advising their patients because of the feedback the patients will get from these kind of applications. The kind of thing where I was talking about, where you get tremor severity versus exercise. Yeah. So when it's a two-way communication street, when data is going both directions, when it's good for the patient as well as good for the medical research community, then very much doctors will be, you know, making patients aware of it, and you know, patients will be signing up. Yeah, you'd imagine.
I'm glad that it's research first that has launched on a massive platform, because what I would hate to see, especially in the US, given the way their health system is funded, is to see insurance companies
or pharmas
launching this type of application.
That's the downside of it being open source.
Yeah, but the point about it is that, as you said, you can decide who sees your data.
Yeah.
And you know, there are people for who lead very healthy lives and have great, you know, exercise, eat well, and all the rest of it, who would be able to take advantage of better premiums by doing this type of thing. Me, not so much. Okay, not so much. You know, so I can't say I can't say that my body is a temple. If it is, it's a large temple. But yeah.
But on the other hand, Chris, I mean, if you did sign up for something like this, you would be getting the constant nagging from the application, and you'd be getting the quantified data back as well to help you keep track of and nag you in the right direction.
Yeah, and that is one of the things actually that the studies have shown time and again, that constant and good feedback does improve performance.
Yeah.
So it does, and that would be a great thing. So there are pluses and minuses to it, but I think overall this is a massively positive step for society in general.
Yeah.
I really do. I think it is. I just hope that the EU does not kill it and tie it up. I think there's more good in it than bad.
I agree, and in fact, I downloaded the M-Power application onto my phone.
Yes.
And went to try it out. And the first 3 questions asked age, something else, and country. And if you didn't say US, you could go no further.
Yeah.
And I suspect that's down to regional laws and data privacy.
I think so.
So anyway.
Yep.
We'll push on. So I said that there were a couple of announcements at the Monday Spring Forward event, the Apple event,
yes.
And we've dealt with the one which I think was the most important.
Yeah.
The other announcements which came out of it were interesting but less important, at least in the short term. But I think in the long term as well. The first one was the big one which everyone was expecting, and that was this Apple Watch. We've got the release date, we've got the price, we've got the specs. Everything you need to know about the Apple Watch is now there. In the UK version starts at £299. I think it'll probably be around €350. I don't think that includes the strap. I think the straps are another £30 or £40 on top of that. Again, I'm not 100% sure on that.
Seriously?
I mean, because I'm like I say, I'm not 100%. I haven't gone and tried to order. I'm not even sure you can yet. I think the order doesn't start until next month.
Yeah.
But they were talking about separate pricing for straps. Now, whether the $299 includes a strap and then it's another $40 for a second strap, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a lot of positive things about the watch. It's got a nice form factor. It's got a lovely screen. Tim Cook, when he launched it, he did a demo of receiving a call and talking on it, and you can actually, you can see on the screenshot there, you've got the incoming call, you press the green button and you start talking to the phone. So it's real Dick Tracy type stuff. That actually works. That actually works quite well.
Do I get the big yellow trench coat? I only want it if I can have. Well, you already have the fedora and a big yellow trench coat. That would be brilliant. So that would be brilliant.
True. The thing is, I guess there were a lot of a lot of leaks before the watch came out.
Yeah.
So there wasn't any big reveal except the pricing.
Yeah.
Most of the functionality and the fact that you could make a call from it. Most of everything else that came out about it was to be expected. And to be honest, I think the pricing was a bit steep.
Yeah.
And I've talked to a couple of people about it during the week, and everyone was kind of going, And a lot of these people would be people who would be Apple fans.
Yeah.
So it's a bit disappointing. But as we said beforehand, the point you were making is, this is a first generation device. And if we think back to the first version of the iPhone, it was pretty.
Exactly.
I mean, it was revolutionary at the time.
Yes. The N95, as you said, was its closest competition.
Yeah.
I think Stuart Laughlin, I think from Diginomic, is it Laughlin or McLaughlin? I can't remember. But
Laughlin, yeah.
Laughlin, yeah. He put it best. He said the Generation 1 stuff, the only Apple product that he absolutely wanted was the iPad when it came out of the gate. That was the only one that sort of had his name on it. So that was everything else was, he got it as an early adopter, but this is one of those things he's not sure about.
Right.
Yeah.
So interestingly as well, I mean, there's been a lot of debate on the watch, forward and backward. What's this going to do to the Swiss watch community?
Yeah.
And we saw this guy, the co-inventor of the Swatch, coming out and saying that Apple will succeed and an ice age is coming for Swiss watches. Now, that might be a bit of hyperbole.
Yeah.
But I think as we said about the iPhone, he may well be right. I mean,
yeah.
I don't think they've blown out of the park with their first watch. They haven't.
No.
There are some good alternatives there that are considerably cheaper. The Pebble Time comes to mind, for example, and even the Microsoft Band is not a bad effort.
No, I quite like it. I quite like it.
So they're not going to demolish the market with their first product, but Apple being Apple, they will come out in 12 months' time with a vastly better one with far more functionality, and hopefully drop the price. Although they've never been great at that.
No. They set their price point and then they provide value on that price point. They rarely drop their price point. I think the only product I've seen dropping the price point significantly is the Apple TV 3, which is now $69 and not $99.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
If you want to see an article that gives you an idea of where the future of wearables is at, there was this really interesting one from Disney, and it's their magical wristband, and they spent $1 billion and about 5 years in the development of it. You can see the little girl here, and she's got it on, and it's got a very straightforward interface. It's got the 3 circles, the Mickey Mouse outline. That it's got that on the band, and you hold it up to the device on the wall there, and when it lights up green, it's connected successfully. Now, you do that for things like purchases.
Yes.
But also you do it for opening hotel room doors.
Yeah.
And it's got a radio in it, like an NFC chip, which can transmit up to about 40 feet. So, like I say, like NFC.
Yeah.
And one of the use cases they talk about in the article is, if you book in a restaurant, and they talk about this particular one called Be Our Guest Restaurant, as you're heading there, you're met on your way there by a server who has been alerted to the fact that you're coming, because they know where you are, and the server addresses you by name. There's someone you've never met before. They address you by name. Hello, Mr. Rafferty. Good to see you. How's the family? We have your table, and your meal is already. If you book your meal online, your meal is already being cooked and will be delivered to your table shortly. Choose any table.
Yeah. God help if you're late. You end up with an overdone steak.
They start cooking it when they know you're there.
Yeah.
When you turn up.
I absolutely love that. I had a quick scan of the article, and one of the things that I couldn't see is, one of the biggest headaches that amusement parks have is obviously kids going missing, or kids running off and their parents and all the rest of it. So because it is an NFC chip, let's not beat around the bush here. They're collecting analytics about where you spend your time in the park. They're collecting massive amounts of data about how you spend your time in Disneyland. Yep. So the natural extension to that is, can they, it's not so much track your kids around the park, but if you lose your kids or lose one of them, being able to actually to pinpoint an area where they are or where they have been recently.
I'm sure they know where they are, and that won't be a problem at all. These wristbands are for those kind of situations. They're for also getting rid of traction, and that's one of the big things in the article. It was to try and get rid of friction. On things like queuing for rides and all this kind of thing. To make it easy, you book a time, you turn up, and you're there. You no longer have to run ahead of time and get special tickets to get in early or anything like that. It because it knows where everyone is, it can optimize around things like that. So it's for me, it's a phenomenal idea for Disney, but also it has far-reaching consequences for everyone else and seeing where this kind of world is going.
I think it's just brilliant. I really do. I think it's one of those things that, as a test case and things like that, if you extend that to all-inclusive resorts at hotels, that just becomes fantastic. It really does. For contained use cases,
Yeah.
I think it works really, really well, where you're going and you're sort of signed up for an experience, and this, as you say, reduces the friction in that experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're right. The contained resorts is absolutely it. I know my sister, for example, goes to a resort in Turkey every second summer, I think it is, and it's one huge place with 5 or 6 swimming pools, and it's on the beach as well, and all your food and drink is free for the entire stay. Well, it's not free; you've already paid for it. I guess that's the point. But yeah, same kind of thing. If they had something like that, the wristband, it opens your hotel room. You swipe it to get the bar credit or whatever, and the food, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's and for the hotels as well, as you say, the analytics behind it, phenomenal stuff. Phenomenal.
Absolutely. The only place that I actually think it'll actually be detrimental is actually tipping, for example. Because I unless there is a way to tip and take it directly off the thing, then that would I'm gonna have to bail, man. I've just had another text from the my childminder. My little girl is not feeling so well, so
I'm sorry to hear that.
After on. No worries. Apologies. I shall see you later. Have a good one, and if I make it back in time, I'll jump back on. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers, Chris. Best of luck, Dana. Okay, we'll put on down to 1. Okay, the next story that I saw was, and again, sticking with the Apple announcement, because that's where most of the news from this week came from. And this is about the thin, fanless MacBook that also comes in gold. This is the new, extremely thin laptop that Apple announced at the start of the week. And there's been a lot of discussion about this online, not least from the competition, Asus and Lenovo and people coming on and saying, yeah, well, we've got thin ones as well. The device has got it's got a lot of things in its favor. Not least of which is it uses the USB Type-C port, this new standard, which is nice because it's a reversible USB port, and it can push through a lot of things, not just power, but it can also push through video and data and stuff like that. Against that, it means you no longer have the MagSafe charger, which was Apple's, charger, which was magnetic, and if you brushed against it, it would just come off without any damage happening. The USB one isn't like that, so that's a downside in that respect. It's got an amazing battery life, sure, but it only has a 400 K front-facing camera. It's got a lovely Retina display, which is good. It doesn't need a fan. The processor is an Intel Core M 5-watt processor, which means it's extremely low-powered. And by low-powered, I mean it requires very little power. The flip side of that is it is low-powered in terms of the processor speed. It's at 1.3 gigahertz. This is a curious device. It's not very fast. It's got a long battery life, which is great. It's extremely light. It's I think they said it's under a pound, which would make it about half a kilo. It's extremely thin. It's not hugely expensive. I think it was around $1,600, if I remember correctly, depending on the configuration. That's the USB-C port, but it's lacking, other ports. There is no dedicated USB ports, so you can only have one port to get things in and out, which means you're going to have to buy an adapter. So it's for VGA and stuff like that. So this was a surprise announcement. No one, was expecting this. It moves away from Apple's tradition of simplicity as well, which is kind of why I'm hesitant about it. Apple, the thing Steve Jobs did when he came in was he decimated their models of Macs, got rid of them all. They had a huge amount of them, and simplified it down to one powerful one for the professionals and one hobbyist one for the rest of us, the kind of iMac range. And now we're seeing 3 separate models of laptop. You've got the MacBook Air, the MacBook, and the MacBook Pro. And that's just the laptop. And then you have the Mac Pro, which is the professional desktop, and you have the iMac, several models of iMac. So I think Apple is starting to lose its way a bit at the hardware level. The watch, they didn't knock it out of the park with, and now the laptop lineup is starting to look a little odd, for want of a better word. So I think they're missing Steve, frankly. Sticking with hardware, though, there's some interesting news came out of HP during the week, and that was that HP have started to embrace open hardware, and they've released an open source, an open hardware server, a Cloudline series of servers. They've taken the design. It comes from the Open Compute project. The Open Compute project is an open source, an open hardware project started by Facebook in 2012. Basically, they did it after they were Greenpeaced on how bad they were doing in terms of their data centers. And Facebook, after being Greenpeaced, decided, well, let's do a full 180 and be as green as we can. And they started the Open Compute project to open source their data centers so that everyone could build a Facebook data center. And they went to extreme lengths. They published the blueprints of their data centers, and they published the list of vendors for their data centers, which goes well above and beyond what most people would normally do when they open source. So, and then they brought in a lot of other partners. And because this has been gaining momentum year on year, the Open Compute project, we're seeing other people start to be affected by it. And HP are one of the old proprietary houses, and now they're having to start embracing it. We mentioned, I think it was 2 weeks ago, that HP were releasing an open source switch, and now they're releasing an open source server, the Cloudline server series. So they're being pushed to do that, which is pretty impressive. And the other interesting bit of hardware news that came out was Facebook's own switch will soon be available on sale to everyone. It was an open source design they published, and now there's a Taiwanese manufacturer called Acton Technologies who are taking that design and they're going to sell the switch. Now, for anyone who is into open source anything, you will know that generally the open source solutions are better than the closed source ones, just because any bugs or anything are found quickly enough and fixed reasonably quickly. This is a switch that Facebook are using themselves. Right there, when you think about the amount of traffic that goes through their racks and their servers, this switch has been pretty battle tested. It's called the Wedge. It sits on top of a rack, and it's able to handle serious amounts of traffic. It's open source. The hardware and the software are open source. So, for anyone who's in the data center space who deals with large amounts of traffic, they should be looking at this, because this will allow them to get, because it's an open source and because it's a Taiwanese manufacturer taking an open source hardware and software, the price of this has got to be a fraction of the price from one of the proprietary ones. Cisco, in fact, are obviously one of the targets, as would Hewlett Packard or Dell. And I know now Cisco are starting to become involved in the Open Compute project as well, because they're seeing the writing on the wall, and HP have become involved already. I'm not sure where Dell is on this. I think they're involved as well. So I think they're all starting to be involved in it. So the move towards open hardware is gathering ground. And,
you've got Greenpeace and Facebook to thank for that, which is always good. And the security front, the Freak SSL bug, which was reported during the week, has been fixed if you're on Apple hardware. They fixed it in iOS, on OS X, and Apple TV. So if you have any of those devices, you need to update. And the updates that are available, if you haven't already updated, the updates will protect you from that bug, which is a pretty serious bug. Microsoft have also released patches for that vulnerability. So if you're on Microsoft's software on Windows, look out for the patches and install them, and that will protect you from that as well. What's missing from this list is obviously Android, and Android have come out and said, yeah, for older hardware, we're not going to fix it, which is disappointing. This is to my mind, and I correct me if you think I'm wrong on this, but this is to my mind one of the downsides of Android. If you buy an Android device from Samsung or HTC or whomever, you're dependent on them to roll out the updates. And in a lot of cases, they don't, or they don't for a long time. Whereas if you're on iOS, sure, you have to pay a little extra to buy an iOS device, but you get the updates pretty fast. And if you look at the percentage of people who are on the latest version of iOS, it's in the order of about 70 to 80% of iOS devices out there. The last time I saw the figures, I think it was 75%. They're on the latest version, they're on iOS 8. Whereas when you look at similar figures for Android 5.1, it's single digit. I think it's 2 or 3%, if it's even that much, of Android devices that are on Android 5, Android Lollipop. So that's a security nightmare waiting to happen right there. Anyway, we'll get off platform wars, because that could just lead us all kinds of wrong directions. And I thought this was interesting. We've had a lot of talk about Microsoft on the show over the last few months, and they've been doing some pretty impressive stuff. And one of the, it's ever since Satya Nadella took over, he's turned the company around, and he's decided to make Microsoft be a more outward-looking company. The old Balmer attitude of, no, you can't run any of our software unless you're running Windows, that's long since gone away, thankfully. And what's really interesting in this announcement, which came out today, you can see the date line there is Friday, March 13th. The announcement is that Cortana, the digital assistant that Microsoft have brought out, which has got a lot of good reviews, is now coming to iOS and Android. There's no date line on this, and this is an unofficial leak rather than an announcement. But given that Microsoft have already brought out, lots of other applications, their Office suite, their OneNote, all these on iOS and Android, I would put a lot of stock in this. It would make perfect sense. There's no reason why they shouldn't do it. So on iOS, apparently it's going to be a standalone app. I'm going to be fascinated to try this, because I've been pretty underwhelmed with Siri. I have never tried Cortana, but I've heard good things. So, I'm looking forward to this. This could be really fun. This could be really fun. And even if it's not great, it challenges Apple to up their game on Siri, because I think they've been sitting on their laurels for a while. They haven't had much competition in the iOS space, so they haven't had to do anything. So yeah, kudos to Microsoft. Keep it up, guys. You're doing great stuff. Nokia, speaking of Microsoft, the one part of Nokia that Microsoft didn't buy was its Nokia Here mapping solution. I'm not sure why they didn't buy it. They had their own mapping solution already. I guess they felt they didn't feel the need for it. But what's nice is Nokia have launched its Here maps for iOS. So if you're on iOS, you can now go and download Nokia Here for free. It's got turn-by-turn instructions, the whole thing. Everything you'd expect from a modern mapping application. It's good. I downloaded it. I tried it. It's not bad. There was one or two. I tried it on public transport in London when I was in London during the week, and I compared it to Google's offering on the phone, and Google had better options. So that's one test in one city. So don't go by that. It may be better in other places, but I have now Apple Maps, Google Maps, and Nokia here on my phone, and I check all three. Why not? Whichever gives me the best, I'll go with that. Moving on. Speaking of Google, Google have launched Google Calendar for iPhone, and the only thing I'll say about that is about bloody time. It's good. It's really good. I've downloaded it onto my phone, and it works really well. It's got the ability to pull in events from Gmail. It's compatible with the iPhone calendars already, including Exchange and iCloud. So it can pull in all your other calendars. You tell it which ones to display, which ones not to display, all the usual kind of stuff. It'll throw up your notifications, everything. It really looks well, and it works really well. And there are lots of good calendar apps on iOS. There are, except the Apple one. The Apple one is appalling. It's never been any good. But this one, this Google one, is really nice. So I've started to try it out. I have a couple of others on my phone, but I've started to try out the Google one, and I like it a lot. So if you're on iOS, give it a shot. See what you think. Google also, and I'm sorry Chris isn't here for this one, because this is more Chris's area than mine, him being a cloud architect. But Google have launched this thing called Nearline. It's as the title suggests, it's a low-cost storage service for cold data. What does that mean? Well, I guess the easiest way to explain cold data is it's data that you don't need to have instant access to. So Amazon have a similar offering, and it's called Glacier. And with Amazon Glacier, it's very cheap storage. It costs 1 cent per gigabyte, 1 US cent per gigabyte. And stuff that you put into Glacier, it's kind of, as the photograph here suggests, it's kind of for long-term storage. You put it in there, you set it and forget it. If you ever need to access it again, the time it takes from you asking to access it to you actually receiving it is about 3 hours. So it's probably put away in a tape in a rack somewhere, and they have to get a robot to find it and pull it out of the rack and so on. And you're competing with other people who are also looking for stuff. I'm guessing, I'm not sure what the architecture is, but it's something like that more than likely. So Google are going after that market with this new offering. Google's offering, though, is the same price. It's 1 cent per gigabyte. There you have it, 1 cent per gigabyte. And the use cases they talk about here in the article are, think backups, log files, or older photographs. That's the kind of thing you put in there. But the huge difference, you can see it in this chart here. The Amazon offline, it takes 3+ hours to get the data back. Google's Nearline at the same price takes 3 seconds to get the data. Online stuff, which you're paying more for, it's like 2 cents per gigabyte, 2 to 3 cents per gigabyte. That's sub-second response. The Nearline is 3 seconds, they reckon. That's huge. So you can either get it in 3 seconds or 3 hours for the same price. Which one are you going to go for? This is really putting it up to Amazon. The thing is, the cloud stuff has really become a race to the bottom. It's not a place I'd like to be, frankly. And good luck to Google and Amazon and Microsoft in that space. It's a bit of a bloodbath in there, I gotta say. I'm glad I'm not working in there. And given we've talked on this show lots of times before about Amazon's radical opaqueness their lack of transparency around their energy and emissions. When I see things like this coming along, when Google are a lot more transparent about their energy and emissions, I kind of put a little bit of a smile on my face. We'll move on. So Google balloons, cell towers in the sky. This is Google's Loon project, where they're serving 4G to they're saying a whole state here. Basically what that means is a single balloon can cover an area the size of Rhode Island. So if it's a state, it's a small state. But this is Google's plan to distribute internet access to people in places where they don't have it easily at the moment. They're doing it using 4G. So anyone who has a 4G capable phone sitting underneath one of the Google balloons should be able to get internet access. They're going for 4G as opposed to any version of Wi-Fi because they reckon in places where there is no internet access right now, people are leapfrogging and going straight to smartphone, which makes sense. And they're looking at targeting places in Africa and South America initially, as well as New Zealand, where they've started because they had a friendly government there. Last two stories. Interestingly, we talked already about Apple's commitment to medical research. They've also made a commitment of $50 million to diversity efforts, which is really interesting. And they're trying to get people outside the white male demographic into technology. And the last story, which I thought was nice, comes out of the BBC, where the BBC are giving away mini computers. And by mini computers, you can think of something like an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi. In this case, they're giving out these things called microbits, which are stripped down computers similar to the Raspberry Pi. And they're giving them to all pupils starting secondary school in the autumn term. BBC is also launching a season of coding-based programs and activities. And it'll include a new drama based on Grand Theft Auto and a documentary on Bletchley Park. This is great, as long as you got to remember the students who are receiving these stripped down computers, they're what word am I looking for? They for the most part, a lot of these students, it'll be the first time they'll come across one of these little micro devices. And for the teachers who are teaching them, it'll be their first time as well. I'm not as worried about the students as I am about the teachers who, if they haven't come across one of these before, won't know what to do with it. The article doesn't go into much detail, so we don't know. You have to hope that when the BBC release this to the students in the autumn, that there is a whole pedagogical system behind them so that the teachers are brought up to speed, given lesson plans, so that they know how to actually teach the kids what to do with these things. Otherwise, what will happen is these 1 million little microcomputers will sit in a pile in the corner of the classroom and never be touched. Anyway, presumably that's not what's going to happen. They'll do it right, and we'll start to see kids in the UK, at least, getting an education in these devices, and the example being used by other kids in other countries. So that's it. That's our show for this week. I think we had a bit of a time. What am I trying to say? The clocks went forward in the US last weekend. Last weekend. So I think a couple of people might have missed out on the show as a result of that. The clocks in Europe don't go forward for another 2 weeks. So the show will be at this time again next week and the week after. So when I tweeted it out, it is 9 Eastern instead of the usual 8 Eastern. I think if I'm getting my numbers right. No, not Eastern, Pacific. And instead of being 11 Eastern, it's 12 Eastern, I think. I think I've gotten that right. These time zone things always mess everyone up. The sooner we do away with daylight saving, the better. Anyway, We shall see you next week. Thanks for your time. The show has been recorded as usual. It'll be up on YouTube. It'll be up on SoundCloud as well in audio only, and I'll be posting links to that. And we'll see you all next week. And thanks for your time and attention. Bye-bye.